no one is ready for what BRICS is about to do. That warning does not come from a conspiracy theorist. It comes from one of Asia's most respected diplomats, Kishore Mahbubani, a man who spent decades inside the world's power circles, representing Singapore at the United Nations and sitting face to face with the architects of the global order. He's not throwing words into the wind, he's making a statement, a bold one. And if he's right, then we're standing at the edge of a global transformation, one that could challenge the West's dominance, shake up the global economy, and rewrite the rules of the 21st century. What exactly is BRICS planning, and why is the world so unprepared? Today, we'll break it down. This is not just a story of emerging economies. This is a glimpse into the next global power shift. Let's begin with a simple question. What exactly is BRICS, and why should we care? BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, a group of 5 major emerging economies. At first glance, it might just look like another international club, but beneath the surface, something much bigger is happening. The term BRIC was first coined in 2001 by Jim O'Neill, an economist at Goldman Sachs. Back then, it was just an acronym, a clever way to describe fast-growing economies that were not part of the traditional Western club. South Africa joined the group later in 2010, turning BRIC into BRICS. But this is not just about catchy names anymore. These countries represent over 40% of the world's population. That's more than 3 billion people and about a quarter of the global GDP. But perhaps more importantly, they've been quietly building a new vision for the future, one that does not rely on Washington, London, or Brussels. Instead of following the rules set by Western institutions like the IMF or the World Bank, BRICS nations are creating their own systems. For example, they've already launched the New Development Bank, or NDB, an alternative to the World Bank, offering billions in loans for infrastructure and development, but without the political strings attached. And that's just the beginning. They're also talking about creating a BRICS currency, a bold move that could weaken the dominance of the US dollar. Imagine if countries could trade oil, gas, or food without using dollars at all. That would send shockwaves through global markets. In fact, the group has already expanded its influence. Countries like Iran, Egypt, Argentina, and others have either applied or shown strong interest in joining BRICS. A new world is forming, and it's not being led by the West. This is where Kishore Mahbubani steps in with a bold warning. He says, the post-Western world has already arrived. The only question is whether the West realizes it or not. And that might sound dramatic, but look close and you'll see what he means. For centuries, global leadership was dominated by Western powers. Britain during the colonial era, followed by the United States after World War II. International laws, trade agreements, and even global values have often reflected Western priorities. But BRICS challenges that narrative. It is not about war, it's not about confrontation. It's about reshaping the table where decisions are made. Take China and India, for example. Together, they're home to more people than any other 2 countries in the world. They're not just manufacturing hubs, they're setting the pace in AI, space, digital payments, and green technology. Russia brings energy resources. Brazil is a food powerhouse. South Africa is a gateway to the African continent. So when these countries talk about creating a multipolar world, they're not just dreaming, they're actively building it. And here's the real kicker. While the West often debates its own decline, BRICS is focused on the future, on building railways, investing in solar farms, funding ports, and strengthening trade routes. So, what does this all mean for the rest of the world? Is BRICS creating a new global order or just shaking the old one? And more importantly, is the West prepared for what's coming? Let's talk money, because perhaps the boldest and most disruptive move BRICS is planning is in currency. For decades, the US dollar has been the king of international trade. Whether you're buying oil from Saudi Arabia, coffee from Brazil, or microchips from Taiwan, chances are you're paying in dollars. Over 85% of global forex transactions involve the US dollars. But here's the catch: that dominance comes with power. And for the US, it's a power that's often used as a political weapon. When Washington imposes sanctions, it doesn't just freeze assets, it locks countries out of the global dollar system, shutting down trade, banking, and access to international markets. We've seen this with Iran, Cuba, North Korea, and most recently, Russia. In response, the BRICS nations have started asking, what if we don't need the dollar at all? And that question is no longer just theoretical. There's a serious talk now of launching a BRICS currency, a shared medium of exchange that could be backed by a basket of commodities like gold, rare earth minerals, or even oil, not tied to any one country and definitely not under the control of the US. Imagine this: India buying Russian oil, China importing Brazilian soybeans, purchasing Indian pharmaceuticals, all without ever using a single US dollar. This would be a tectonic shift in the global finance. Take Russia and China. In 2023, over two-thirds of their bilateral trade was done in rubles and yuan. Russia is even accepting Chinese yuan for oil and gas, a dramatic departure from the petrodollar system. Or look at India and the UAE. They recently finalized a trade deal to trade in rupees and dirhams, skipping the dollar altogether. And China, it's been pushing its digital yuan in cross-border payments, experimenting with central bank digital currencies that could one day flow freely across BRICS nations, independent of SWIFT or Western control payment systems. This trend has a name: de-dollarization. And while still in its early stages, the momentum is growing, especially among countries that feel vulnerable to US sanctions or frustrated by the inflation exported by America's loose monetary policies. But this is not just about money, it's about power. As Kishore warns, the dollar is not just a currency, it's a strategic weapon. And the world is waking up to that reality. For the US, the consequences should be enormous. If enough countries abandon the dollar for trade, demand for US Treasury bonds may fall, making it more expensive for Washington to borrow money. Inflation could rise, American influence could shrink, and while the dollar will not disappear overnight, it's deeply entrenched in global finance. The BRICS move signals the beginning of a long, slow unraveling of Western financial dominance. So the question is no longer if the world is shifting away from the dollar, it is how fast and who leads that transition. Is the global financial system about to fracture into East and West? Are we heading toward two competing systems, one dollar based and one BRICS led? And most importantly, is the West prepared for a world where the dollar is no longer king? And it's not just about currency anymore. BRICS is growing fast and the world's starting to take notice. In 2024 alone, the original five members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, did something bold. They extended invitations to six new countries: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This was not just a diplomatic gesture, it was a strategic shift, one that instantly transformed BRICS from a coalition of rising powers into something far more serious, a potential counterbalance to the Western led global order. And let's be clear, this expansion is a big deal. Take a closer look at who's joining. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, giants in global oil production, are bringing their vast energy wealth and control over crucial shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, long isolated by Western sanctions, sees BRICS as a new economic lifeline. Egypt connects the group to North Africa and the Mediterranean, while Ethiopia brings East Africa's second most populous nation into the fold. And then there is Argentina, rich in lithium and agricultural exports, but stuck in chronic financial crisis, desperate for alternatives to the IMF. With these six additions, BRICS now stretches across four continents and includes some of the world's most strategically positioned nations. It represents more than half of the world's population, controls a significant share of global energy and exports, and is quickly becoming a geopolitical force, not just economic one. But here's what makes this group so fascinating. They don't always get along. Iran and Saudi Arabia have been bitter rivals for decades. Ethiopia and Egypt have had tense disputes over the Nile. India and China still face off along their shared border. And yet, they're coming together. Why? Because despite their differences, they share a common frustration, the belief that the current global system is unfair, rigged, and too heavily tilted in favor of the West. They're not joining BRICS because they agree on everything. They're joining because they agree on one thing. The world needs a different system. As Kishore Mahbubani puts it, they're not asking to dominate the world. They're just asking for fairness. BRICS is offering an alternative, a different table where power is not concentrated in the hands of a few. And it's not just talk. The new development bank, the BRICS alternative to the World Bank, is offering loans in local currencies to avoid dollar dependency. Countries like Egypt and Argentina have already expressed interest. The goal is simple: build a financial system that respects sovereignty and avoids the traps of debt diplomacy. And perhaps the biggest shift of all is this: with the addition of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, BRICS is now a major energy bloc that gives it leverage not just in trade, but in shaping global pricing and production. For a century, energy markets have been shaped by Western led institutions and the petrodollar system. Now that balance is starting to tilt. So, what does this all mean? It means that BRICS is not just surviving, it's evolving, it's building alliances across cultures, religions, and ideologies. It's gathering countries that once had no real say in global decisions and giving them a voice. This is not just expansion for the sake of expansion, it's a restructuring of global influence, and it's happening in real time. The question is, has the West realized it yet? Or will they wake up to find that a new world order is already taking shape without them at the head of the table? Kishore has been sounding the alarm for years. To some, he's a diplomat. To others, he's a strategist. But to many around the world, he's a voice of clarity, especially especially when it comes to understanding the global shifts that most Western leaders seem reluctant to accept. His message is simple but powerful. The West is stuck in the past. According to Mahbubani, Western powers still operate under the assumption that their dominance, military, economic, and cultural, is permanent, that the institutions they built, the currencies they control, and the rules they wrote after World War II will last forever. But he warns those days are coming to an end. The global center of gravity is shifting back to Asia, he says. The West just hasn't realized it yet.